Welcome to The Trouble with Football, the show about football's biggest annoyances. Every episode, I sit down with a fellow fan and podcaster to dig into one gripe that really winds them up. From financial fair play to shin pads barely bigger than a credit card, no topic is off limits. Today, my guest with a gripe is Mike Johnston. Now, Mike is a multimedia journalist at BBC Radio 5 Live Sport. He's a football content creator, and he's also host of the Ealing Road Podcast. Started in 2022, the Ealing Road Podcast is a podcast for Brentford fans by Brentford fans. It covers match analysis, club news, and discussions about the team's performances. Mike, welcome to The Trouble with Football. How are you?
I'm good, thanks, Neil. I really need to update the bio of our podcast because that for Brentford fans by Brentford fans has been used and used and used and used. But it was the most obvious thing to say when I started it in 2022, but I do need to change that.
It's still relative.
Yeah, exactly.
So listen, mate, I really appreciate you coming on today. I'm really looking forward to having a chat with you. First of all, though, I just want to ask about Brentford, about being a Brentford fan. One, how did you become a Brentford fan? Is it a family thing or a game that made you turn into a supporter? Or how did it all come about becoming a Brentford fan?
Interesting story to be fair. When I was a kid, I didn't really have a team per se, but I did have Brentford roots in the family. And I had an uncle that sadly passed away in 2007 and another uncle, and they were kind of best mates, used to go to Brentford together quite a lot. And he took me to a game after my uncle passed away and, kind of fell in love with Griffin Park, fell in love with Brentford, have had a season ticket since, started going home and away when I was old enough to do that. And have seen our rise from League Two all the way up until the Premier League. So my uncle always tells me that I have had it so good as a Brentford fan because I have seen nothing but growth, whereas he's had to endure years and years and years of pain. So it's been fun for me, but probably not so much fun for the older generation of Brentford fans.
It's funny you say that, actually, because that was going to be my next question about how does it feel now being a Bees fan with that journey that you had? You're now what most people would call relatively settled Premier League side. So how does it feel?
Amazing. My first game, believe it or not, and it's when I tell people that you couldn't have a more perfect first game. My first game at home, it was at Griffin Park and it was against Accrington Stanley in League Two. Who are they? Exactly.
Exactly.
Yeah. And then to my uncle's right, to see nothing but growth since then. Promotion in my first season of supporting Brentford and going to Griffin Park to League One, and then a few years in League One, then promotion to the Championship. And now the Premier League, I feel like there has been so many amazing days. And I have had a bit of heartbreak in between, failed playoff campaigns, a loss against Carlisle in the Johnston Paid Trophy when it was called that at Wembley. So there has been a few down moments, a game against Doncaster that if fans know about, they will know how heartbreaking that was, especially for a 12, 13-year-old Mike sat on the Ealing Road. But, some of the days we've had in recent memory have been a dream. And, the novelty for me still hasn't worn off, the fact that I get to go to some of these grounds every week and really experience Premier League football and see the best players in the world play football. That's not worn off for me yet. But credit to the people that got us here, credit to the players that have got us here. I think everyone's part of the story in their own way, but Matthew Benham, I think, is the one that probably deserves the most credit in terms of the recruitment structure, and his brain has managed to get us from League Two all the way up to the Prem. So can't complain.
It's a wonderful time in that sense for clubs like Brentford, like Brighton as well. I'm a Brighton fan, you see, so I always try and get them in the pod as early as possible. But I understand. I resonate with everything you've just said there. It's been a fantastic opportunity for Brentford, and as I said, with their change of manager recently, this season they're doing pretty well already. I think probably for people outside of the club, it was a surprise that they've done so well, I think. But how are you feeling for this season so far?
I think, from the outside looking in, I think it kind of felt like the house was falling down. Thomas Frank going, Mbumo going, Wissa going, Norgard going, our captain, arguably the most important out of the three that we lost player-wise. But Keith Andrews has come in and he's done a really good job so far. I think it's fair to say. I think the home record has been super impressive. We need to sort the away form out, but I'm confident Keith can do it. And I think, when the appointment was made, there were a few raised eyebrows, but also with the caveat that this is Matty Benham and Phil Giles we're talking about. They wouldn't have made this decision without being sure. And then it turns out that, like their history of making right decisions, this one looks like another correct one. So yeah, I can't complain with the season so far. It's been really fun, particularly at home.
So tell me about the podcast. So the Ealing Road Podcast. For those that don't know, can you give me the reference as to why it's called the Ealing Road Podcast?
The old stand at Griffin Park that a lot of us used to, the terrace at Griffin Park that a lot of us used to stand on was called the Ealing Road. And although I think we've done a good job of transitioning to the G-Tech, I do miss that place with every ounce of my soul, because I think it was just the best place to watch football, the place that I kind of first started going to football matches and first experiencing live football without watching it on the telly. And yeah, so we wanted, when we started the pod, to kind of give it a name that resonates with a lot of Brentford fans, and a lot of memories, great memories, all came standing on that Ealing Road at Griffin Park. But in terms of the pod itself, it kind of started as a bit of a passion project. In 2022, I was doing a master's in sports journalism at St Mary's University in Twickenham. And we had this studio and kind of like an in-house studio. And it was something I'd always wanted to do, but I never really had the means to do it. And I thought, well, I've got a studio now, I can start doing the pods in person. I learned how to upload, learn how to edit audio. And I was learning all these skills whilst doing the masters. So it kind of just made sense to do it. Bit of a slow start, but managed to get a few like good guests on at the start. Managed to get a solid and consistent kind of array of co-hosts and people that wanted to do it week in, week out. Because, you know, once you start a pod and it starts to gain a little bit of momentum, it's difficult to keep it up every week. But, you know, once you start to get into the routine of things, I think since we started it in 2022, we've had some amazing guests on. We recently had Pontus Jansson on the podcast, which was our best episode we've had. And non-Brentford fans might not know why that was such a big deal for us, but Pontus Jansson is like a vocal ambassador of the club. He's made over 100 appearances. He was the captain that got us promoted to the Prem, so that was a big deal for us. But yeah, at the moment we get about 1,500 listeners every week, which I think for a club of Brentford size is decent, and it's miles ahead of where it was in 2022. So yeah, really happy with the pod, to be fair. It's become something that I look forward to doing every week, and chatting to the same guys about Brentford and listening to the comments we get, reading the comments we get, replying to those comments. It's nice to have like an interaction with the fans.
Oh, I agree. And congratulations on it so far. It's really
Thank
good.
you.
It's a really good watch, to be fair. I've had a little look at it as well. Even as a Brighton fan, it's nice to see what other people are doing for different pods and things. So congratulations. It's good work so far. I really enjoy it. Listen, I think the time has come. You know why you're here. I've been told you've got something to add to my list of problems with the game. So I suppose I'll hand over to you for the next few minutes. Mike, tell me, what do you think is the trouble with football?
I think the trouble with football is the rise of social media. And I want to caveat this whole argument by saying that I think social media in general is a net positive for football. The platforms it provides, I think fans are more informed than they've ever been in terms of how to analyse games, how to talk about football. The news angle of it, I've never been as up to date, and I've never been as much of a news junkie as I am now. When stories break, thanks to the journalists, thanks to the content creators, thanks to the 24/7 content loop that we're all kind of engrossed in some way. Whenever there's a transfer in the summer, or whenever there's a big story about your club, you immediately jump on Twitter, you immediately jump on TikTok, and you want to consume as much as you can. So I want to caveat it by saying that overall, I think it's net positive. However, I think with that there are negatives, and they are really starting to annoy me. And I think the main one being, the main negative being the negativity of it. I think with how tweets and how TikToks are boosted these days in terms of the algorithm, the ones that are more controversial and the ones that are more negative obviously pick up more traction, and it kind of feeds into the psyche of not only yourself, but I think the wider fan base as well. When it comes to players, when it comes to managers, when people are really negative, I feel like it can make others negative quite easily, despite them maybe not being as negative as the person who tweeted. I think there is an instant need for success from fan bases, because you see your rivals doing so well and kind of basking in the success of their team's success on the pitch. The immediate thought, and a fair thought, is why isn't my club doing this? And you take to social media to kind of vent that. I think another aspect of it is impatience with players and how one player can go from being amazing one week to being terrible the next week. He's rubbish now. He's had one poor game. And I think player abuse as well. I think that's a big part of it, because I think even with Araujo, the story coming out of Barcelona that he's had to take a break from football over the last couple of weeks, there is no way that if you're a professional footballer, you don't, and I'd be really impressed if you didn't, but if you don't go on social media after a game and put your name into Twitter and see what people are saying about you, think about how difficult that would be, and how difficult it would be to read those comments when you do see people going overboard and calling you this and that for a performance. So I think that's a really bad thing. And then finally, I think it's quite hard to come up with original opinions these days because of the 24/7 content loop. I think there is so much to consume. And I feel like once something is started to be talked about quite a lot, everyone latches onto it and it kind of becomes a paradigm. So the example that I used when I sent you the kind of brief for this is football is rubbish because of X emerging tactical trends. And I feel like people latch onto that and they talk about it whether or not they actually believe in it, because it's the thing to talk about. So I think there's a few things there to kind of unpick. But yeah, I think the trouble with football is social media, but I do think overall it's a net positive.
Wow, thanks for that, Mike. Let's try and unpick that then. I mean, I suppose the good place to start is where it all started. So you got to think back for those people that are a little bit older. There was no social media before really about 2008, 2006 area is really where it started to come into play a lot. And before that, I suppose, even before the internet, very few people gave their opinions publicly or had the opportunity to. It was more down the pub or to their friends. But in the sense of a wider audience, no real fan had the opportunity of giving their opinions a lot. And as soon as things like, mostly I think Twitter is the big one, back in, I think it was 2006 it started, that suddenly became the place, like in the rest of society, a place to give opinion on whatever is going on in the world. And football was no different, obviously. So I suppose my question to you then is, if you think about those early days, what do you think clubs and supporters felt about giving their opinions those? But do you think there's been a real change from positive to negative, or do you think it's always been negative?
It's difficult to say because I wasn't old enough to be using Twitter.
Oh, don't say that.
Back in 2006. But I do generally feel these days, it does feel like the accounts that perhaps don't even have that big of followings, their tweets that are negative are somehow getting more traction. And I do think there has been a drive towards more flammable kind of content as opposed to safe content. And whether or not people are more comfortable with kind of letting their frustrations be known, I'm not sure, but it does feel like, at least these days, it feels easier than ever for someone to go to a football match, decide that what they've watched is absolutely terrible, and then to kind of just go on Twitter, put loads of expletives in there, call some player rubbish, call the manager rubbish, call for someone's head or call for someone to be sacked. And then you suddenly see that tweet starting to gain traction. And to be fair, there are people like myself sometimes who get embroiled in Twitter wars that I'd never mean to do. And I always think, why did I even reply? Because these people are just not miserable, but it just comes across that they are arguing for the sake of arguing, and they're being negative for the sake of being negative, to kind of maybe turn other people that way too and make them see their point of view. And I'm not trying to belittle anyone's opinion, but it just is tiresome sometimes to kind of troll through stuff, and not really get a grasp on the real problem. That's what I'm trying to say. It's never constructive criticism. There's always a difference between constructive criticism and what these people say. For me, I'm always trying to unpick a game or unpick a manager's weak points, but do it in a way that you can see some solutions, or not so necessarily calling for player X to be benched or manager X to be sacked.
Yeah, I think if you look at it from the club's point of view as well, I mean, obviously most football clubs now, nearly every football club has some sort of social media presence around. There's a really big sort of fine line between a club being hit with a wave of sort of sack the manager or whatever demands might be about a particular player, as you said as well. And sometimes, an unhappy fan base on social media is difficult to ignore as a club. So, there can be a sort of a wave of force that comes from social media tweets or whatever they might be to the club. And that does have an effect. And we've seen it in the past. I'm sure we have. Whether the club will ever admit it, it's become a situation where the instant survey of people can happen on social media. The club can make a decision based on basically tweets and comments and posts. It's a crazy situation.
And I do feel like if clubs aren't doing that, then they're not looking at the full picture. Because I appreciate, with some bigger clubs, there's a match-going fan base and then there's a worldwide fan base. And it's relatively easy to gain the opinion of the worldwide fan base because they're all on social media. Match-going fans, however, are different. But if the club isn't looking at social media, I think it's to the detriment of them, because you are not able to kind of execute a social media strategy that's going to please everyone on social media. Not necessarily it has to please everyone on social media, but I feel like, you're setting yourself up for more criticism and more negativity if you're not looking at social media and seeing what people are saying about the manager, seeing what people are saying about your best players, for example.
Yeah, I know, I agree. I think the other side of this is there are positives, as you said earlier as well, for clubs in particular, and also smaller clubs in particular. One of the big positives, one of the examples I give a lot of the time when I talk about this is if you think of Grimsby Town, right? So they're a really good example. They probably get, I think they get an average gate of around 7,000 to their games. They've got 90,000 followers on X, right? And a lot of that is driven a few years back when I think Jason Stockwood was the chairman of Grimsby, and he was very positive on social media. And there was a scenario going when he was chairman that he used to go on social media after the games. And this is where the following came from, because he used to talk to fans directly and answer things and things like that. So there are positives about the club getting out there and talking to the fans really directly as much as possible. I mean, having said that, though, as I was saying that, I remember there was a famous quote that he gave about that situation where, let me see if I can find it. He said about after being on social media accounts, he said, after a negative result, trying to highlight the positives was like inviting 50 people to line up to punch me in the face. And I thought, yeah, that I can understand that as a chairman. So he's trying to do the right thing, but at the same time, it's not quite working out all the time. So, yeah, there are positives and negatives from a club's perspective. The other one, obviously, that comes to mind is Dorking Wanderers, who I think they started as a park team, a group of friends, but they used social media to create a following, which also created sponsorship and all these sorts of things as well to get them up to the National League. So there's those smaller clubs, I think social media has really helped them to broaden their brand out.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think so.
So from a player, you mentioned players' perspective as well. Now, there are lots of stories about the negative side of players using or being abused online as well. Do you feel that has got worse? Do you feel there's anything we can do about it? What's your thoughts on general the abuse that players get directly on social media?
I definitely think it's got worse with the rise of social media. And I think we're kind of in a bit of a new age of it, because, the pundits that talk about football, the most popular pundits that talk about football nowadays, did experience this kind of abuse, but it was never direct, I think, at least online. And it was all in the newspapers and it was all the traditional news cycle. I don't think any pundits these days have had to deal with the social media abuse that some of these top footballers do now. And I think it's so much worse, and it's been highlighted, quite obviously by recent tournaments and the England team, and Harry Maguire comes to mind, Marcus Rashford, Bukayo Saka. It's awful. And I don't think that, the younger pundits would have experienced it to a degree, but, players like that, you can't really know how that must have made them feel, because there's no one in their situation before to have experienced something like that. And I just think it's, people say it's part and parcel of being a footballer. I agree. You should be able to stand up to criticism, and you should be ready for criticism when you don't perform on the pitch. But like I kind of mentioned, there is a difference between criticism and just going for someone. And I feel like social media these days, there's definitely more people that criticize fairly, but there's a rise of people that go for people, whether that be racism, whether that be just general abuse, whether they go for something about their appearance. It's all it's not nice to do that kind of thing. And I just feel like if you are a player, it must be so. I don't know what you think about it, but I just think if I'm a footballer and I'm on social media, I'm always going to check what people are saying about me after a game. It would take a very strong person to not check what people say about me after a game, because you want to know. Like if I do a podcast, I'm immediately going to the comments the next day because I want to see what people are saying about the pod. So yeah, it's a difficult one with abuse, and I feel like the pundits these days, or at least for now, and I feel like there'll probably be a new kind of age of pundits coming through the next 5 years or so. They'll be able to talk about social media more, but the ones or us, the traditional media, we don't really have an idea as to what that's like, bar the kind of interviews they do around it.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think one thing I've realised over the years, I've got kids that are teenagers, 20-year-olds. So the impact of social media on people's lives of a certain generation now is very clear. And it doesn't matter whether you're a professional footballer or a baker. It doesn't really matter. Social media now is part of our world, and the impact on this generation of people is huge, absolutely huge. And I think you're absolutely right. I think you hit the nail on the head there when you talk about pundits. I think there are pundits now that are out there that are, 50-something, 40-something pundits that were about when social media was there, but it wasn't as bad as it is now. And they haven't experienced that. Yes, they've probably experienced abuse on the terrace, in the stadium, but they finish their game, they get in their car, they go home. That was it. And now it's a constant thing. You trying to tell anyone under the age of 25 to not use social media is impossible. It's part of life now. It is everything. In some respects, you can't get a real life without it now. So I totally understand that. And I think there was an interesting study done in Brazil, actually, where they've actually worked out Brazilian professional footballers. They got them to not look at social media. They did a study, and they worked out that their mood and their performances, if they looked at social media before the game, compared to not looking at social media before the game, was completely different. So that the impact on them mentally and their mood and the way that they played and performed was totally different. And they actually tried to create a rule for professional footballers to not look at social media the day of the game and things like that. So there are things out there that are proving that this is having a huge effect on players, not just players, but players are the one in particular, I think, because the way that they perform is so specific and obvious, that they're the ones that get the majority of the feedback or criticism.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think it's the players that score the goals, it's the players that are like not the leaders on the pitch necessarily, but the ones that are normally responsible for make or break moments in the game. And it's not surprising, but I always go back to the point of, there's a fine line between criticism and going for someone, and I feel like people these days they tend to go for people a lot more. So yeah, I'm not surprised with that study. I think if I was a player and I came on social media after a heavy defeat, or if I was a player and I came on social media after something big had happened in a game, and I saw some of the comments, I'd hate to be Rashford or Saka or Sancho after that Euros final, because not a whole country. I know it's a small sample size, but it's a loud minority. And you see the kind of stuff that they had to take. And it's supposed to be, if it had gone well, it would never happened. It would have never happened. If they'd scored their penalties, it would have never happened. So, you're punishing someone for failure on a football pitch to a certain extent, but then you're making it personal, which is what's wrong with it.
Yeah. And I think one of the things, I don't know if you agree with this, but I also think about the nature of what social media is and how easy it is to be faceless. And I
Hmm.
think the concept of not having an identity online and being able, therefore, to say whatever you want to say without any reprimand is probably the issue more than the social media itself. So, if, for instance, for an example, if for social media accounts, you had to give your passport, your ID, some sort of way to prove that you are who you are, that would be very difficult then for anyone to give an abusive tweet online or a comment, because we would know exactly who they are. I appreciate it's a fine line when it comes to privacy, but
Yeah.
at the moment, the difficulty is that, you can create as many accounts as you want and say whatever you want and no one can find you.
Yeah, I mean, and it's a coward's route, to be honest. It's like, if it kind of tells you that you're not doing something right if you're needing to be anonymous to do it. If, in a way, it's like
Yeah.
if you're not willing to say these things and stand up to it and stand on your opinion, then you shouldn't be making that opinion. Do you know what I mean? It's like it's just crazy to me that how someone would set up an account, not put their name on it, and then throw abuse at a player. Whereas if you believe in, I don't know if you believe in what you're saying, but if you think about the utility of what you're doing, it's not achieving anything really. If you're offering criticism and feedback, then stand on your opinion. And if the player replies or if the manager replies and you get a response, then you can talk to them about it. But if you're making an anonymous account to throw abuse at a player and that player doesn't know who you are, it just tells you everything you need to know, because you just know that you're not doing something right.
Yeah, I mean, there are other stories sort of on the flip side, the funnier side of these sort of things. When, again, in the earlier days of social media, when footballers used to manage their own social media accounts, there are some stories there around, some of the things that footballers did, not really understanding the impact of social media. I mean, one of the funniest ones I think is, there was I think it was 2016, Victor Anichebe, who played for a number of different Premier League clubs, but particular at this time, he was playing for Sunderland. They just lost 1-0 to West Ham. And and I think it sort of gave us a look behind the curtain of how social media press officers and things like that spoke to players, because he'd obviously been sent the message to tweet out. And the message that he tweeted out was, can you tweet something like, unbelievable support yesterday, great effort by the lads, hard result to take, but we go again. Yeah. So
I think that's happened with Phil Foden as well, I want to say, at some point. I think it
more
has
recently. Yeah. And
there's actually a funny story about Thomas Frank at Brondby. Maybe not so funny, but the reason he left Brondby, which was the club that he managed before he came to Brentford as an assistant coach, the chairman of Brondby made an anonymous Twitter account and started giving him grief on Twitter. The reason he left Brondby was because Thomas Frank found out it was the chairman and said that I want no part of this anymore, which is a crazy story. For anyone that wants to read about that, there's plenty of articles about it. But yeah, the reason he left Brondby was because the chairman of his own club that he was managing made an anonymous account on Twitter and started giving him grief about the performances on it.
Wow, that's amazing. That is amazing.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. That is
That's
the
really
ultimate
funny.
use, isn't it, of social media to try and get rid of your own manager. The 2012 Ashley Cole, the famous, obviously, England left back, possibly the greatest left back of all time. He had a moment where he actually got the biggest fine still to date from the FA for social media abuse. He got fined £90,000 for a heat of the moment tweet straight after a game for Chelsea, I think it was. He literally just described the Football Association as #bunch of twats. So, there are moments where you just go, yeah, okay, maybe social media should be used by professionals, not just the players. Listen, Michael, I suppose the other couple of questions I just had at the end, really, before we finish, were from a perspective of, how do we move forward? How do we reduce the bad bits but keep the good bits, I suppose, of social media? Have you got any thoughts on this?
I think, what you mentioned about the kind of ID verification might be a potential route to explore. But to be honest, and not to sound bleak and kind of a bit of a doom monger, but I just do think the way that, everything is at the moment, it kind of seems like if you go on social media, you're going to see more negativity than you will see positivity. And it's a little bit depressing in that aspect. I don't think I don't think much will change, especially with how kind of divisive the UK is right now. But it just feels like we are on a road of divisive kind of rhetoric across all aspects of life, especially if you live in the UK. It feels at the moment like everyone's disagreeing with each other all the time, and I feel like that's pertinent in football as well. So I think there are measures that you can introduce to stop it, especially when abuse goes over the line. But the thing that I find most depressing is that we got World Cup in 2026. If the final or the semi-final goes to a penalty shootout, and certain players miss penalties, you can bet that that's going to happen again. And I don't think we are any stretch or any closer to going into a game and that sounds ridiculous, by the way. It sounds awful, but if that happened in the next 5 years or so again, and it happened to the same players or to different players, I don't think we are any closer to that not happening. I think it's probably likely that we'll see that kind of same thing again.
No, I tend to agree, and that is worrying. I think you're absolutely right. When it comes to social media, it's here to stay. We all know that. And, even from your point of view, this is part of your living as well, social media. So
Exactly,
like it is for mine. So it's a situation where we have to try and find the positives wherever we can with it. And it does work in the most for a lot of clubs, a lot of players, a lot of fans. It gets us all closer wherever we can to the people that we want to talk to. But yeah, it's that fine line, isn't it? That fine balance.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. No, I think so.
Thank you so much, Mike. I really appreciate you coming and have a chat with me today. Just to wrap it up, first of all, thank you for coming on this episode of The Trouble with Football. And thank you to everyone for listening or watching on YouTube. Please don't forget to like and subscribe wherever you can, really just to spread the word. Just remember one last thing, that in football, the annoyances are what keeps us talking. See you next time for more Trouble with Football.